I'm going to go through our usual introductory slides, and then we can get going with the agenda. Welcome to the February 13th, 2025 Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. Some of the logistics. The presentation will be recorded and posted to the Washington County Board of County Commissioners webpage. The agenda does hold time for public comment. Comments will be permitted in the time allotted per committee rules and at the discretion of the chair. In regards to public comment, only the committee chair may recognize a public attendee. You may use the raise the hand feature to indicate your desire to participate when the chair acknowledges the time has arrived on the agenda. And those calling in would also be recognized and given the opportunity to speak. There is a designated time on each agenda to allow members of the audience an opportunity to speak to the committee. And once recognized, the response will relate only to the request made by the committee and may be subject to a time limit. And any new business that arises will happen at the next meeting. And tonight we are not having translation services, so I'll go ahead and skip this slide. And with that, I'll stop sharing. Maybe. Okay. So I'll turn it over to the vice chair.
Okay. Welcome everyone to our first Garbage Recycling Advisory Committee meeting for 2025. I'm Sandra, your vice chair, filling in for Ashman, chairman, who couldn't make it tonight. So I guess the first thing to do is to do a roll call. Erin, did you want to go ahead and see who's all here?
I can go ahead and do it. I have the spreadsheet right in front of me. So, so tonight, Ashvin is absent. Brian is absent. Erin Stein.
Here.
Misty.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Myra's absent. Pete.
Present.
Rich.
I'm here.
Sandra.
Here.
And Vinod.
I'm here. Thank you.
That completes the roll call. And we do have a quorum.
Okay. It looks like the first thing on our agenda is the GRAC Communications and Solid Waste Recycling Program update. Is that from Erin?
I do have some things this evening, and I think just for the committee, I wanted to let you know we have Sarah Coates joining us. She is shadowing. Eventually, she'll take over as the moderator for this group. So we're really happy to have you here, but she's just going to be working behind the scenes. She may be asking you questions, but welcome, Sarah. We're happy to have you supporting us. And I actually have quite a few updates. I feel like it's been a number of months since we've connected. And I'm just going to kick off with what's on top of my mind. I've been up since 5 a.m. this morning dealing with inclement weather response. And I just thought I would do just a brief update for the committee because it has been a minute since we've had cold weather, inclement weather response. I know that we have discussed some heat issues in the past. And just those of you that are not aware, for unincorporated Washington County, we do have specific requirements for our haulers to report operational changes to us. Those reports need to come to our office, and specifically to my attention. We have a team of about 6 staff members that work to do web updates and the Garbage and Recycling Day app to do push notices out. And then also just staff that need to be able to respond to inbound emails and community member phone calls. So it definitely takes a lot of staff manpower and diverts our attention when these events pop up. Certainly not as frustrating for us as it probably is for our service providers that are out there in real time trying to make adjustments. And I just really appreciate the proactive approach that we have taken over the last 3 or 4 years to our inclement weather approach. So allowing for early starts, early, curtailment, prioritization of waste collection, that's really up to the service provider as they're out there in the field. Unless it's a multi-day event, we haven't been super prescriptive as to those types of items. And I've seen a huge decrease in community confusion with this approach when we are reached out to by a community member. Our direct point of contact is to send them right back to their garbage and recycling collection company. That's where they're going to get their most accurate information, either by calling the website, and then a lot of our haulers do an excellent job of pushing out notifications as well. So I just appreciate all their hard work. Today was a tough one because it hit different parts of the county at different times. So the situation was really ever evolving, and really hoping that everybody stayed safe and sound, and most operations were curtailed early today. And I don't have a lot of hope for services resuming tomorrow. So kind of just preparing for another rough day. Do y'all have any questions related to inclement weather or our processes and procedures?
I just want to say my hauler started at 5:10 this morning coming down our street. And unfortunately, they didn't get the garbage picked up, but we did call in and they did have a thing on their phone. I'm going to try it tomorrow, but that was awfully early.
Yeah, there were a lot of partial routes ran today, I think, unfortunately. But, okay, so I will tell you that there is a regional metro work group that's a system disruption and disaster preparedness work group that I support. We probably have 15 to 20 representatives from emergency management staff to solid waste staff that are on that work group. Beth Vargas Duncan, who staffs the Washington County Haulers Association. And then we pull in haulers and different service providers. And it's been really good. And we have some good projects teed up. Some of that will probably be coming back to you all in the next year or so for some considerations. There may be some rule adjustments. We're also working on some more regionalized communication strategies. So lots of interesting stuff happening in that space. I think I'm just going to do these in the order that is the most painful. So the next thing I need to talk about is the county's budget situation. Unfortunately, the county has over a $20 million budget deficit. And unfortunately, we don't have an easy way out of it. We have used curtailment and a variety of strategies over the last 3 or 4 years to get to a balanced budget. And as I've heard our commissioners say, we're actually in a budget crisis because our influx of tax income to the general fund revenue is just being outpaced by expenses. So I just want to preface the situation that we're up against some really tough constraints. As the solid waste and recycling division, I thought I'd just bring you all up to speed as to how our services are funded. So we are serviced, we have funding sources from 3 different streams. First is a Metro grant. That Metro grant is paid for by everybody in the system paying regional system fee. So every load that's going and being processed in this area has a fee associated with that. And then Metro collects those fees, and then some of those are sent back out to local governments to provide services. So that's making up about 1/4 to 1/3 of our total budget. We also collect gross receipt revenue, and we have that from 2 sources. So the garbage and recycling collection companies collect the gross receipt revenue. So you'll see that on your bill. Currently, that's at 3%. And then we have a 3% gross receipt revenue that applies to the facilities that are in unincorporated Washington County. So that applies to the Hillsborough landfill that Waste Management owns and the Recology composting facility in North Plains. With our current budget, we have really met a delta in solid waste and recycling where our inbound revenue is just keeping up with the expenses that we incur to run our programs and operate. And so we have been tasked by leadership to do a couple of different things this budget season. See where we can trim back, like what opportunities do we have to pare down either services or even hard costs like supplies. We have been tasked with looking at FTE reduction. So if we actually had to eliminate staff, what that might look like for our department and what type of work we could do. We have been asked to look for additional revenue sources. So we have Recycling Modernization Act coming. And with that, there are some new funding streams for items like contamination reduction funding. And also we have the gross receipt revenue. And so there's actually a mechanism that could be put in place to collect additional funding. So overall, we had to put together a budget package that takes our budget and looks at a 10%, a 15%, and a 17% reduction. When you're talking about a $3 million budget, those are pretty significant cuts overall. The proposal that we are putting forward, which would impact GRAC and come back to you, is that gross receipt revenue at 3%, that is a fee that's collected throughout the metro region, and Washington County's is the lowest at 3%. Most jurisdictions are at 5% or higher. Some go as high as 12%. And so leadership has indicated to me that they would like to include the recommendation that we do a 1% increase on the hauler's gross receipt revenue. So I did some back of the envelope math for that. So if we do increase from 3 to 4% on gross receipt, the average customer in urban unincorporated would see about 28 cents per month rolled into the rate. So it definitely does have a rate impact. We will have to wait on final board direction, but I just wanted to kind of tee that up. The new budget is supposed to take effect July 1st. I'm vying for us to not be in a position if we get through rate review and there's additional increases that we may need to make through that process, that we do 2 increases. So my goal is that we would run any changes in tandem with our standard rate review process, and any changes would go effect August 1st. But because you all do make that rate recommendation to the board, I just wanted to preface that this is coming your direction this spring for consideration, and I will come back with additional updates as I know more about how deeply they're asking us to cut. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I was wondering, I know we've had for a few years the $2 surcharge going back to the market issues, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, maybe. Is that going to change with the RMA? Will that cover some of those, some of that need? And would that maybe be like an opportunity to offset some of the, if that was reduced or could be reduced a little bit to cover some of that increase?
Yeah, so we knew back in 2021 when RMA passed, many jurisdictions rolled that $2 recycling fee in to their regular rates. They don't have it as a standalone. And we really wanted to wait and see what would be coming with RMA, because it's much easier to roll back a separate fee than try to back that out of the fully baked rate. I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you yes. I think it's going to be not an immediate impact to the cost. So they have 3 years to on-ramp the plan. And what we need is the viable end markets of those recycling costs to come down. So as we stop paying for those recycling costs and those costs come down as ratepayers and those costs begin to be assumed into this new system, I would love for us to be able to roll back that $2 fee, but I just think it's going to take us a few years for that to work itself out. The way RMA is launching, the system expansion and the rate prioritization is going towards rural communities that don't have any recycling services, and we have a very well-established service. So we won't see a flip of a switch on July 1st with any real tangible changes. It's really going to be a slow integration of the new upgrades of the system over a couple of years. So yeah, I'd like to say that we could just say, let's roll that back, but it's going to be a few year process before we see that come out in the rate math.
Good explanation. Thank you.
Go ahead, Pete.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess just to stay on that topic for another moment or so, I don't think I was on the GRAC when that fee was implemented, or maybe it was during that blackout period when I, as a DEQ employee, was not allowed to talk about rates. However, we're talking about this in the context of RMA. So remind me, and maybe folks at home, if we have people listening in, what was the genesis for the $2 fee initially?
So I wasn't here back then either. Right. The genesis was to cover recycling costs, but Vinod, you had your hand up. So if you have a better explanation that I'm probably going to come up with besides I need to go pull old staff reports, that'd be great.
The short version of it is that it was when National Sword was taking place and the markets crumbled and the commodities no longer came close to covering processing costs and recycling costs. But it was before there was a span between the costs increasing overnight and rate reviews coming up. So it was triage to stop the bleeding, essentially, because it just went the market shifted so dramatically. I mean, it's Econ 101. The supply was still here and the demand was gone. So yeah, it was basically triage to get us through that system until the rates could kind of catch up to the costs of recycling.
Up until then, it was a huge positive. Like our system not only went from having to add that extra cost, we went from having revenue that was really high go to negative. So it was a big, like Vinod said, it was a triage, and the board was inclined to leave it as a separate line item. And so the RMA will take some of that sting out because there's going to be producer funding that includes what's called a commodity risk fee. It's essentially offsetting the costs of recycling to get the costs down. Close to the goal 0, but the commodities move up and down so fast. Sometimes it's going to be a surplus, sometimes it's going to be a negative. And then there's also a contamination risk fee. So it is going to help lower the costs for the households as far as that goes. But I don't know that solves the shortage issue out of the gate. I think Aaron can tell you this better. It's the first few months with the RMA kicking off and funding coming in and figuring out where money's going and setting rates for the next. It's going to be massively complex. It's just going to be, there's so many moving parts that'll be happening in the first few months.
Yeah, I get all that, obviously, because we have to deal with all these things at DEQ to try to figure out how do we make this thing work now in a couple of months. But I guess, I understand, China shut off. Okay, that was 8 years ago, right? Here we are 8 years later. The markets have really rebounded and stabilized and become much more normal, right? Over that period of time.
No,
Not what I'm seeing in the
Much more
DCR.
than being shut off is what my
they
point
they
is.
may
So,
have they may have stabilized, but they just didn't come back. They didn't come back to the level they were. Um, even materials like cardboard, you know, if you go back, not this last year, but the year before, it tanked from going up and up and up, and it tanked to where mills didn't were like normally they call and ask for it. It was kind of the other way around, like, hey, we need loads that we have. So
right, but
it has
to your
stabilized to some rate, but it stabilized at a cost.
well, to your point, the prices do go up and down. It's kind of like the last true barely regulated marketplace in our economy, right? So, that does happen. But the total shock, the big drop was the initial drop, and we've now had 8 years of $2 per month fee recovery time for, transition. Obviously RMA is going to have some impact on what the marketplace looks like, but I don't know. Isn't it time to kind of question the amount of that over this time? And maybe there's a transition or a bridge amount that weans us into RMA. I just don't think that, locking into $2, which of course that was 2017 $2, which isn't $2 anymore. But I don't know. I just seems to me like this, it's the kind of thing that once it's there, it's just kind of easy to say, well, it's baked into the cake. And I don't know that the cake is even going to be cake anymore.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
so
that was our point. We didn't bake it in, and all of the other jurisdictions in our region have. So we're running the lowest rates, even with that fee added on top. Our intentionality was we wanted to wait and see because we've had this conversation. It's been brought up by prior GRAC members. Certainly, we've discussed it within the Haulers Association as well. And it's easier to remove a $2 fee from a rate structure than it is to unbake those costs from the system in total. That was our philosophy. Certainly.
Yeah, right. I get it. And I think because of that advantage that we have, if we do some analysis to figure out whether or not $2 is the right number, or maybe it can be a different number that's lower as a bridge, I think it might be worth it to folks to go through that exercise and determine whether or not that same level of support's required.
so Pete, if I'm understanding you, or what I'm hearing is you're saying bake it into the rates.
No, I'm not necessarily saying baking into the rates. I think RMA is going to take care of whatever that shakes out as. I'm talking about as a bridge from where we're at to where this ultimately will stabilize with RMA. We might want to think about, is this the right number? And do some analysis and try to figure that out. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying bake it in. I'm not saying incorporate into the rate structure, although that's obviously a more simplistic way of dealing with this as you're developing rates. But right now it just is. When I talk with my neighbors, it's like, what's this annoying $2 recycling fee here? How come our recycling is costing more? It's like, well, as we've been talking, the explanation is where there was this big crisis. Well, are we still in crisis 8 years later? It's a hard sell.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to be talking rates very soon in this group. So
Well, I
certainly
won't be,
appreciate
but we all will. You all
I
will.
appreciate that elevation, and we'll put a pin in it. Oh, also my AI is trying to record everything I'm saying right now. So give me just a second to turn my Android off. We don't want to create too many public records. Okay, here we go. So that's all I have related to budget, just prefacing that part of the rates package, if we get the board direction, which will most likely come in the month of March, when we come back to start talking rates in a couple of months, you will see us probably wrapping in that recommendation to increase the gross receipt revenue. Okay, other topics. We have some exciting things happening with our Metro partnerships. First of all is the RWAC, which is Metro's Regional Waste Advisory Committee. They have revamped that committee makeup. They removed staff level positions and replace those with elected officials. And for Washington County, Commissioner Treese is serving on that committee. This committee, the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, is extremely critical because they help set the Metro's WEP's budget. So that's their environmental services team. This includes like the transfer station rates and the regional systems fee that I touched on a bit earlier. So the fees that are set within this group do impact all of our ratepayers. They are also working on, within Metro, they have published a draft systems facility plan. This is a multi-million-dollar plan. It's a 20 or 30-year snapshot of the types of investments that Metro would like to make in the region. I think for you all in particular, when we think about access to services here in Washington County, particularly when we're thinking about household hazardous waste and the ability to self-haul at an affordable rate, we don't have that access. There's very limited events that are hosted by Metro for household hazardous waste or sharps collection. And if you need to take a large volume of items, you're either driving into Portland or you're driving down to Clackamas Metro's facility. So I have parts of the plan that I'm really supportive of, which would be include building out a facility here in Washington County. Metro already has purchased land in Cornelius. They also would like to get a secondary facility in the kind of southeast part of the county. I want to learn more. It's a very lengthy plan. It's available on their website, but there's lots of good information in there. So I have links to the Regional Waste Advisory Committee and the Systems Facility Plan. And I'll make sure we include those in any meeting notes that go out after, so you can just read up on that. There is going to be space for public comment when Metro takes that to their committee. And I think they're going through RWAC one more time with the Systems Facility Plan this month, and then it will go to their council, Metro's council, for a review. And as other things come up with Metro, I'll try to keep you engaged. We had a lot on the agenda this year. Okay. Now things are getting less painful as I'm going down the list. This is nice. RMA, we are in a really good place with preparing. As I alluded to earlier, we're going to do more of this slow, soft launch, on-ramping process. It's not really going to be this hard switch. So we have teams working with Circular Action Alliance on what our education and outreach strategies are going to look like. We have Kathy and myself. We're going to be digging into our rules and seeing how we can best align with the state statutes. There's lots of regional conversations happening. I think for us, there's a couple key things that we're going to be seeking from DEQ. There are new materials that can be recycled with the USCL, which is the universal list of recycling items for the state. But there's also a few things that would technically be coming off the list. And we are working with DEQ staff for a pathway to get like a waste shed type of approval. So we don't have to educate in a disjointed way. Ideally, with this exemption, we'd be able to keep our current list of items and just be adding things for the interim and not having to add and remove. And then some of those things that we'd be removing could potentially be back in the mix within a year or two. So just thinking about how messaging to the public around recycling is already challenging and can be confusing, and how we can simplify that and the process. So we have some logistics that we have to follow through with DEQ to get funding in place, and some contracts that will have to be worked out with Circular Action Alliance. But the whole goal is to get most of those housekeeping items taken care of if we can by July 1st. But knowing that July 1st isn't such a pressing deadline, They may be a bit delayed, but with that, I just wanted to tee up any rule changes that we have will need to come through your committee as well. Right now, we have placeholders in for June, but we may adjust that timing and we'll certainly be transparent. As it's going to be a pretty sizable rule making, we're not only going to address things that will get us in a line with RMA, we have a bunch of housekeeping items that Kathy's been tracking since our last rulemaking, which I think, Kathy, was that in 2023 was our last rulemaking? Yeah, so we have some housekeeping items to take care of as well. Do you have anything to add about that, Kathy?
No, a lot of them are, when you go to a rule and go, I'm sure it says ABC, and then you look at it and you go, nope, doesn't say that. So things like that, we're just firming up some things and adding a few new things, plus the RMA.
Great. Well, I've probably overextended my time, but I have two quick things. Mattress Extended Producer Responsibility Program is now live in the state of Oregon. And if you need to know where to get rid of your mattress, you go to Bye Bye Mattress and you can look up an access point next to you. It sounds like things are still in flux and they're still working on drop-off locations and how that is all going to work here in the state, but really exciting to see this be in place and being implemented. And then the last thing is we are doing a tire recycling event here in Washington County through Les Schwab Tires this month. So it's running through the 28th. You can take up to 8 passenger or personal truck tires to any Les Schwab, and they will recycle those for you at no charge. We had some remaining state cleanup funds from 2 years ago, and we're working to spend those down. And I think we have the capacity to take over 8,000 tires. We haven't put a dent in that in the first 2 weeks. So I'm hoping with some boosting of our advertising, we can work to get those tires out of the community, because the tires are the bane of my existence. They're one of those things that just really gets under my skin when we're out there trying to deal with code violations. So, and with that, I will turn it back over to you all. That's all the updates I have.
Thank you, Erin. Anyone else have any items, things coming up, events? I wanted to mention James Recycling now has a depot on Beaverton Hillsdale Highway. Their next event is March 8th from 10 to 1. He's going to be taking taps, straws, utensils, number 1s, number 2s, and number 4s, number 5s, and number 6s. Wow. There's more information on his website for that. But if anyone else has anything coming up, I know Sunset High School is going to have another recycle event, but I don't know when that is. They had one in January. If nobody has anything, I'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is Kathy's communication and solid waste updates.
Yeah, I usually do a short little calendar update and any other things. And I know you guys have heard this before, but it's a plea again to let me know if you're going to be able to attend sooner rather than later, especially when there's action items, because there's a slight little bit of almost a panic that we might have had to cancel this and logistics. So it's really helpful to me. So it's just everyone did really well this time, but I'm just going to keep reiterating as the meetings go on. In terms of our calendar, there's just a few things that I wanted to point out at the next meeting. We're going to have 2 of our code enforcement officers, the supervisor and then the officer that goes out in the field, come and do a presentation to y'all about, what's a violation and how they work them and what the system is. And so hopefully you find that pretty interesting. I know I've seen similar ones before, and it's really eye-opening, kind of like how it works. So they're going to come and do that. I'm hopeful to get an update, if not that meeting, the next one, on the business food scraps, because now we've passed sort of that 3-year window of the mandatory food scraps collection at like those businesses that produce food waste. And if we can get our business team to come and give you an update as what they found out and how that's going and how much participation they're having. And then the only other thing in March is it's possible we may have GRAC officer elections, either a vice chair, it's a vice chair or chair, or we could even do it in May. I'm just teeing it up now that if anyone has interest or wants to run for either of those positions, just shoot me an email, and I will eventually get it on. You serve for 2 years, but you can serve again. So if, for example, Ashwin wanted to serve again and nobody else wanted to, then he'd be able to do that. But it's just an opportunity to allow any of the remaining members. And same with Sandra. She's vice chair now. If she wants to run again for that or run for chair, she could, or neither one. So go ahead and let me know. Right now, we're thinking about canceling April. We don't have anything lined up, and we're going to be really busy for a couple months after that. So it seemed like that was a nice pause. We've talked in the past about shortening or, maybe only having a meeting a quarter anyway. And so it's kind of in that vein. The May meeting is May 15th. That's a week later than normal. Normally we're the second Thursday, that's the third Thursday, and that's because we've moved to that cadence in order to allow a little bit longer time for rate review, because it's really scrunched from when the reports get turned in and when the results get presented to the GRAC. So just a heads up, it's May 15th. The rate review does require a quorum. So that's one that I'm hopeful to get as many members present as possible. I tentatively put the rules there. It's probably more likely they're June, but between that time frame, the proposed administrative rules would also come before you, and that also requires a quorum. It's something that's set in our code that goes to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. And then the other thing is I'm working on a tour, and there's some possibilities. One is maybe touring Pioneer Wiping Cloth. So they're the ones that take like the textiles and then turn them, you've seen they've tentatively, I think, may be able to do that. The other sort of things could be like, I don't know if you've done the Goodwill Bins tour before. I did that once. That was interesting, kind of the behind the scenes of what happens at a Goodwill store. So that's another possibility. And then there's always the Restore or, places like that. If any of you have some ideas about a tour you might find informational, go ahead and shoot me the idea, any of your ideas, but I'm trying to have at least one tour a year, especially with new members. So that's where I'm at right now. More to come. This would be probably summer, just because sometimes weather just makes everyone not want to go, and it's just easier sometimes, or if we don't have a meeting, to do a tour instead. But I'll keep you all in the loop. And other than that, I don't have any further calendar updates.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Next on the agenda is oral communications. So does anyone have anything they want to bring up in the committee or outside?
I would just say if any attendees have an interest, they could raise their hand and we could unmute.
I'm not seeing anything. Okay, so should we go to the action items next? Okay. The first one will be the certificate review for SWATCO sanitary service. And Kathy will take over from here. Okay.
Thank you. My name's Kathy Folsom. I'm a senior policy coordinator with Washington County Solid Waste and Recycling. Washington County Code 8.08.04.214 requires that solid waste and recycling staff and the committee review all sanitary service certificates once every 4 years. The purpose of the review is to determine whether the certificate holder is in compliance with the code and applicable rules and regulations. And compliance is demonstrated through a staff review of a comprehensive questionnaire and other records. Currently, there are 8 certificates, which makes it easy because that in a 4-year cycle is 2 certificate holders each year. SWATCO's certificate number 7 was randomly drawn for this year's review. This is the 3rd cycle. We have 1 more after this, so it'll happen next year, and then we will have done an entire 4-year cycle, and we'll have reviewed all the certificates. SWATCO provides collection service to 2,813 rural residential and 130 rural commercial accounts in Washington County. I want to note that I came to you all in at the December meeting and did an interim report. That's partly because our review wasn't finalized at that time, but the code required that we come to the advisory committee by the end of the year. So at that time, I outlined how much of the investigation had been done and what was still remaining to be reviewed. There have in the interim, since the December meeting and this meeting, some of the items that were indicated as not in compliance for both of the service providers have now become in compliance. So some of it went away. The report regarding certificate number 7 or SWATCO is, sorry about the dog, it is intended to bring the final certificate review report for action tonight by the committee. As outlined in the staff report, the certificate holder is in compliance with this. Okay, give me 1 second and I will get the dog to stop.
It has been my whole day today. I have 2 huskies. All they want to do is be outside.
Well, yeah, it's husky weather out there.
Our Doberman did not want to go outside.
Just to prove it was a dog.
He probably needs a
A
sweater,
puppy.
Vinod.
Yeah, our Dane, also Vinod, she took like 2 steps out and then was basically trying to still walk on like the one shred of grass that was out there. Like, just go and come back.
So
And
to
just-
resume, sorry for Shasta the puppy. She wanted to participate. As outlined in the staff report, the certificate holder is in compliance with the administrative rules reviewed, including the consistent service requirement, miscollection, customer new account information, new customer information packet, training on implicit bias, complaint procedures, all general billing statement information, and business recycling requirements. Staff met with SWATCO on February 5th to discuss the findings of the review. It was intended that the certificate review process be collaborative and that staff and the certificate holder work together to identify areas for improvement that would ensure compliance. And both SWATCO worked to fix the billing statements so that they would be, use terms comparable to what are on our rate sheets. So the process worked the way it was supposed to, and now they're fully in compliance. So based on the review of the information provided by SWATCO, it appears that the certificate holder is in compliance with the code and administrative rules. Therefore, staff recommends that the Washington County Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee accepts the staff review and findings that SWATCO Sanitary Service, Inc. has demonstrated that the certificate holder of Sanitary Service Certificate number 7 meets the requirement of Washington County Code 8.04.214 Certificate Periodic Review. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Kathy. So does anyone have any questions or now's the time for discussion?
No, do you need a motion? I will make a motion to accept staff's recommendations.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, I'll go ahead and accept that. Is anyone, can I second it or does someone else have to second it?
I'll second.
All right, so do you want to just go ahead and do a roll call vote? And I don't know who wants to lead that.
I can go ahead and do it again. Use the same sign-in sheet. If you could please indicate your vote orally. So first one would be Christy,
I vote yes.
and then Leslie,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
and Vinod.
Yes.
Okay, so that's approved. Next item is the certificate review for Walker garbage service. And Kathy will lead that as well.
Thank you. Let me get my packet of information out. Okay, so again, I'm Kathy Folsom. I'm the Senior Policy Coordinator with the Washington County Solid Waste and Recycling Division. As I mentioned before, the Washington County Code requires that staff and the committee review all sanitary service certificates once every 4 years, and that currently there are 8 certificates resulting in 2 holders being reviewed each year. Walker Garbage's certificate number 8 was randomly drawn for this year's review. As reported, Walker Garbage provides collection service to 11,585 residential and 153 commercial accounts in unincorporated Washington County. The same note that I made with SWAT code that I did come before the committee in December with an interim report that indicated at that time what had been found to be in compliance and what wasn't in compliance. Since then, some of those items have now come into a state of compliance, although with Walker there are still a few that aren't. As outlined in the staff report, the certificate holder is in compliance with many of the administrative rules reviewed, including consistent service requirement miscollection, customer new account information, new customer information packet, training on implicit bias, translation services, complaint procedures, and multifamily general service requirements. Walker Garbage, the certificate holder, has agreed to complete certain actions to gain full compliance with the requirement to provide billing statement standards, including reduced rate program bills, notices of the reduced rate program, and billing standards for Dropbox compactor collection services. For the billing changes, they're going to work with staff, and it's to be completed no later than August 1st, 2025. The reason for August 1st is because that aligns with any new rate changes that might occur from the general rate review. And I wouldn't want it to go past that, because then the billing template might change and they're already changing rates and it could get messy. So Walker has agreed to work with staff to more closely align the terminology on their bills to reflect how it's shown in our rate sheets. And part of the reason for that is that we often have customers that may get frustrated because they get a bill and they don't understand it, and they look at our website and they come up with our rate sheet and they can't figure out either the numbers are rolled together or the naming conventions are different. So a classic example is for years, we used the very correct term of demurrage for Dropbox. when you keep it longer than the allotted time that your rate covers, your haul fee covers. That's an old shipping term that reflects like the time a rental starts and a time that, you're late and then ends. But in terms of what customers, it's much, much easier to just refer to it generally as rent or rental or something like that. So sometimes it's just trying to make the terminology more understandable. So they're going to work with me on the bills. And then the other issue is their reduced rate program notices. They need to get that on when they have customer bills that are in arrears. Our admin rules require that they let those customers know that of the availability of a reduced rate program. It does not remove their obligation to pay their past due bill, but it does give them information about going forward. If they do qualify, they could possibly receive a much reduced rate. So they're going to do the notices, both for termination of service and for bills in arrears by no later than June 1st, by providing me an example of the notice. I met with Walker Garbage on February 4th, 2025 to discuss the findings. As I said before, it's intended that the certificate review process be collaborative and that staff and the certificate holder would work together to identify reasonable plans for ensuring compliance. Walker Garbage has agreed to work with staff to complete the action items by the date specified. So based on the review of the information provided by Walker Garbage, it appears that the certificate holder is generally in compliance with the code and administrative rules, provided that the action items are completed. Therefore, staff recommends that the Washington County Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee accepts the staff review and findings that Walker Garbage Service, Inc. has demonstrated that the certificate holder of Sanitary Service Certificate Number 8 generally meets the requirements of Washington County Code 8.04.214 Certificate Periodic Review, provided that the action items are completed. And I will be returning to the committee in December of this year with a report as to if all the actions have been completed and at that time they would be in full compliance. So they have, we give them basically the next year to work on the items that need some work. And then we come back and we did that last year with waste management. If you remember, in December, they had the same thing, action items to be completed, and they all were completed. And I did a short report about that. So other than that, I am available for questions, and Walker Garbage representatives are here also if anyone has any questions of them. Christy?
I just wonder if you have, or Walker Garbage has any idea of how many people might have been affected by not being notified that they were eligible when they should have been notified. Is this like just a few, or a chronic problem, or almost never?
I don't know. I mean, they do have notice of it. This is a very specific notice. This is when you are going to potentially have a termination, a service interruption. They give a 7-day notice saying, basically, you have to pay your bill or your service will be stopped. So I don't think there's very many of them, but I see that Carrie Walker has raised her hand, so maybe she could be promoted and we'll let her speak more directly.
Okay, here we go. Thanks, everybody. Yes, what I wanted to say is actually, great question. because Walker Garbage actually goes the extra mile in this area in that we do courtesy calls. We don't interrupt anyone's service without them first getting a call from us. The good news is we have just recently converted our software, and so we'll be redoing our late notices. So this is a great time to, in the new format, include that information, but they do get it conversationally in every courtesy call that we make. I think we are probably one of the few companies that actually go that extra mile to make that phone call and not just interrupt the service. But at that time, Blake, our customer service rep, says kind of just what Kathy just said. Unfortunately, it doesn't help you get caught up and brought current, but please know this is available to you going forward. So each customer that's in that dire situation does receive that information from us at this point, just not on that late notice quite yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any questions, comments, discussion? Not then, you can make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation as is stated in the report. I'll go ahead and make the motion.
I'll go ahead and second it. Unless Chris.
I cannot have it.
I'll go ahead and have a roll call vote for this one.
Sure. Christy,
Yes.
Leslie,
I was trying to say, I was nodding vigorously. Yes.
I'm staring at my piece of paper.
Yeah, I realized that as soon as I nodded. Like, she's not looking at me.
Pete,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
and Vinod.
Yes.
Based on the roll call, it was moved and seconded and 100% were in favor.
Right. Thank you, Kathy. Actually, I had one question. This reduced rate program has been going on for like about a year now, hasn't it? And I was wondering, is there any way we can get maybe an update or some kind of report on how it's going and maybe how many people are taking advantage of it, if it's meeting our expectations or exceeding it, anything like that in the future meeting?
Yeah, we just finished 2 full years, which is really exciting. And I think just off the top of my head, we have about 1,600 participants enrolled. So it's going very well. I think we projected 2,000 at peak performance. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased, and I can certainly come back with a more formal update.
And the program goes for 2 years per family or per person, right? And then it gets reviewed after that, or they can reapply. If I
Yeah,
remember.
once you're approved, you're on the program for 24 months if you stay within unincorporated Washington County. If you do move within Washington County, we ask you to reapply in case you have changed hauler service area. And what we have set up is a notification process. So about 2 to 3 months before you are to fall off the program, you will get a notice from Community Action that it's time to reapply. So we actually started that process back in November of last year because we onboarded everybody starting in January.
Great. Okay. I guess next on the agenda is just oral communication. If anyone has anything that they want to bring up, raise your hand. Rich, go ahead.
I was just going to mention today I used the Recycle Day app to find a textile recycler called Just Porch It. And so they're going to come by on Monday and pick up a couple of boxes of textiles that I've got to go. So I was pleased to learn about that opportunity.
I've used them a few times. They're great.
What's the name again?
Just Porch It.
Oh,
It sounds like they work maybe in 4 or 5 states, and you call them and say, I'm going to have bags out of the eligible items. I think clothing is what they're really going for. And they'll just come by and pick it up. I assume they go and sort it out and then maybe send it to South America, or send some of it probably to like Pioneer Wiping Cloths if it's not,
Mhm.
but it's shoes or other kinds of items. So it's an interesting. We'll see how it works.
They take shoes, purses, old used things. They say soft goods. I guess it's kind of a broad variety of things. But yeah, they're awesome. It'd be nice to have maybe them come in and give a little talk or presentation would be fun too. Down the line.
So Rich, is that for no fee? There's no fee?
Yeah, it's no fee.
Good.
And you can also donate, I'm not sure if it's dollars or the materials, to a number of nonprofits in our area that have, participated, kind of affiliated with the program.
Anyone else have anything? I guess it's time to adjourn then. I don't know what to do next.
This marks the end of the February 13th, 2025 Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. We'll stop recording, and I hope to see you all in March.
Thank you everyone for coming out today.
Thanks. Stay warm, safe.
Thanks,
Aaron,
everyone.
thanks
Be
for the
safe.
uncomfortable conversation you had to.
Yeah.
Oh,